just tell him that we're ready, and he's probably listening when we turn on the mics.
10 seconds and we'll start. This side here. Turn your microphones on if the light is not on. Welcome, everyone, to the August meeting of the Brentwood Conservation Commission. We have some special guests tonight, and they'll be introduced when they come up on the agenda. I just wanted first to make one announcement and welcome our new members and new alternates. So Michelle Sadut was voted a member. Her term will end in 27. Rob Wolfchuk was voted as a member, a full member. His term ends in 27. Doug Cowie is now an alternate with a one-year term to 25. Andy is an alternate with a term to 27. Patrick Marcoux's term has been extended to 27, as it should have been. Heather Dudley Tapman is an alternate with a 2-year term to 26. And Emma Layham is an alternate with a 2-year term to 26 as well. So welcome all of you, and thank you for coming tonight to the meeting.
You're going to give me all that because I don't take shorthand that quickly.
I will do that. I will do that.
Yeah,
yes.
Thanks.
And as is our habit here, there are chocolates on the table if anyone seems so inclined to have a piece of chocolate. We can pass around the basket, and there's more. And there's more.
So do we obviously have a quorum. Do we have full membership of regular members?
No, we're missing Bob Stevens.
No, but you have 2 new members.
Yes, and they're here.
And they're here.
Yep.
That's 3, 4, 5, 6.
No, we have 5.
No, we have 5. We have 5.
5, 6. Lise?
We have 5.
Why?
Lise?
Oh, Andy is now an alternate.
Yeah,
Got it. All right.
So that's a quorum. We can start, and if Bob comes
No,
in.
we need to add 2 to be voting members.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to add our 2 new alternates to their first meeting as full members, Heather and Emma.
As alternates, as voting members.
As voting members.
As voting members.
No?
Well, Patrick's been involved with the Patrick and Andy have been involved with the conversations, that's all. Nothing against the
Yeah.
new alternates.
The conversations are new to Emma and to,
I'd defer to Doug anyway.
oh. Okay, one
I
alternate,
withdraw my
could
motion.
one of the alternates step down so that Bob can sit at the table?
Bob, sit at the table.
No? He needs a packet.
All right, I'm totally confused. So.
Okay, so now there are 6 members here, Bob. 6 members here now. Paul is missing.
All right. It would have been good to know this coming into the meeting, but that's all right. Thank
Okay, we're all set. There is a motion. My comment would be, it would be good to have someone who has the experience with this.
I withdrew it already.
Okay, you withdrew it. Okay, so is there another motion for Patrick and,
We only need 1 now.
we only need 1, okay.
I'll make a motion to have Patrick be a full voting member tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, welcome, Patrick. Okay,
Fantastic.
thank you. The only person missing from our team of 7 is Paul Kleinman, who's the select board representative who is not here tonight yet. So we do have a full membership and a quorum. Okay, so the first item on the agenda, I'm going to postpone the minutes review until after our presentation so we can get these people moving. So Brian would be on. Rob, if you would like to introduce Brian or welcome him.
Hey, Brian. Hey.
How are you?
Good. Well, thank you. We're fortunate to have Brian Hotz, who's the VP of Land Conservation at the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests, aka Forest Society, SPNF, and other names. Part of our series to meet our local partners and see how we could work with each other. So I'm going to keep it brief and let you tell us about SPNF and how you work with the communities in our area and anything else that you think would be worthwhile.
Sure. Rob gave me a list of things, so I will try and trip through it as quick as I can, but feel free, anybody wants to interrupt, go ahead and do that. Again, I'm Brian Hotz. I'm the VP for Land Conservation at the Forest Society. Forest Society is a statewide nonprofit conservation organization that is 123 years old as of this year. We have a staff of somewhere around 45 to 50, depending on summer interns when they leave. We have programs in land conservation, forestry, land management, recreation, communication, outreach, and then we also have, because we are in Concord, we also have an advocacy department. We get involved in environmental issues that affect New Hampshire primarily. Our history, we got started back in 1901, primarily advocating for good forest management practices in the White Mountain National, or excuse me, the creation of the White Mountain National Forest. For the first 50 to 60 years, we primarily acquired land and passed it to the state and White Mountain National Forest. Since then, we continue to do that. We do a lot of facilitation for both the state and the White Mountain National Forest and towns where we complete projects for them, but we also do acquire our own lands. We own about 200 properties that encompasses about 65,000 acres. We're the third largest private owner in the state. We hold 780 conservation easements or deed restrictions for societies old enough that we did easements before they were called easements. So they were deed restrictions back then. I would say, accomplish, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 20 projects a year. It ranges depending on the year. We have 3 land protection specialists that cover the state and do our land conservation. We do our land conservation. Our statewide goal is to conserve interconnected, biologically diverse ecosystems and combat climate change, protect water quality, provide forest products, sequester carbon, and enhance the recreational resources to the state. We implement that primarily through regional and statewide plans. The regional plan for the area that you're in is really the coastal plan that was just recently updated. We are a member of the Great Bay Partnership and work very closely in this area in particular. Very closely through that, our land conservation is kind of semi-coordinated with the organizations there. We have a monthly meeting or every other month meeting through the partnership where our projects are reviewed and discussed. A lot of trading around of projects goes on there as to who can take on the projects, but we do projects throughout the coastal watershed. Trying to think of other things, how we could work. We work with communities all across the state, certainly to do land conservation, partner with them on projects, in some cases facilitate projects for towns. We've done quite a bit of projects, essentially as partners with towns, and that's pretty, I think, common of all the conservation groups. We have certainly worked within that region. I don't think we've done a ton in Brentwood. I believe we have a couple conservation easements. We certainly worked in a lot of the surrounding towns on a more frequent basis. I know you asked a little bit about some of the other questions about whether towns should hold easements or should do that. I'm not sure, Rob, if you want me to get into those things.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. We've been discussing the pros and cons of the town holding easements versus land trusts and the, ability and capacity of the different land trusts like yourself or CELT or the Nature Conservancy or whoever.
Yep. Yeah, I think it really is I wouldn't rule it out in any way. I wouldn't go one way or the other. I think what you want to do is take each project on a case-by-case scenario. There certainly will be times, and this happens very frequently with the conservation organizations around the state. An individual will call you, they'll have a strong affection towards one group or the other that they want to work with. They may want to work with the town directly. They may want to not work with the town directly. They may want to work with one of the different groups. I think it is always good for a town to just be flexible on that. And I think that certainly towns are capable of holding and enforcing and owning both conservation easements and fee lands. I think they certainly can and should often coordinate or cooperate with a land trust. I think we almost always do that when we do a project in a town. So I think that's a good idea on the other side. I think that, as you've mentioned in your list, yes, conservation easements are a particular complex tool for doing land conservation, but they're also a useful tool for doing land conservation. Forest Society has certainly been an early adopter of them and have used them extensively. We do tend to acquire our own fee lands or acquire our lands outright more commonly now. But conservation easements continue to make up, I would say, half of our project load. Certainly, it does take for towns to understand the particulars about a project and always look to design a project that is enforceable and able to be stewarded. So there are some processes that you can reduce your risk when taking on an easement. So I think that's all gets back to the particular project, how it's done, who you're partnering with, what is the funding sources. All of that should be discussed. The landowner, the type of land, all that should be evaluated. Certainly when it comes to an easement, when it comes to ownership, it's a little more clear cut. So I think that it shouldn't be off the table for towns, but I think it should be a case-by-case scenario.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful. And, you have 780 easements. Our town has in the area of 20. How do you plan for future stewardship and legal issues? And, as these lands are turning more and more, I think in our initial conversation, you mentioned you may be even changing your strategy a little bit with the easements for like larger exclusion areas or something. Could you just talk about those challenges going forward and how Forest Society is addressing them and how we could learn from that?
Yeah, I think and I don't think this is unique to the Forest Society. Forest Society, as I mentioned, was an early adopter. We started doing easements in the very late 60s. Obviously, we've gotten better at doing easements, but our easements are out there, just as many of the other easements that were completed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And some of them are written well, and some of them aren't written well or designed well. And you do have to store those, and you have to work with those. Forest Society has a staff of 5 right now that monitors our conservation easements. We do use some volunteers, but mostly we have our professional staff that will monitor our easements. We have a pretty hefty endowment, a little over 5.6 million to both fund our stewardship staff and also to defend our easements should we need to defend our easements. The goal is obviously not to get into that situation. The goal is to be in a scenario where you're working with your landowners, you're addressing issues as they come up, and you're keeping them from snowballing into, a legal confrontation. I think the thing that we've all learned is easements are drafted better now. They're longer, unfortunately, but they're more clear cut. And there's more information in there so that there isn't as much gray area, which in the past was a pretty common problem with older easements. So I think now in drafting an easement, and then also just your design of the easement, what you agree to take on as a responsibility, what you don't agree to take on. In the old days, we had houses inside easements, and there were square footage requirements. We've had light color requirements, things like that you just won't do nowadays. So as you mentioned, larger exclusion areas, more defined restrictions, fewer restrictions that don't protect conservation attributes of the property. So you're not in charge of fulfilling a landowner's future wishes for a property's, private zoning, as you would say. So proper design of a conservation easement now can reduce the stewardship burden and legal risk going forward. And that's where I think cooperating with some of the groups that have been doing it or other towns, again, going back and designing those projects so that they are easier to steward and less risk to the organization or to the town.
So you brought up one topic, which has been, an issue we have when we talk to landowners, is the extreme length of the conservation easements and all the language. Can you talk about, you mentioned a little bit like why they are so much longer now and, what's driving that, and whether or not it's issues with like if there's a lot of grants and the grantors are putting in more requirements. Can you just, how do we explain, or how do you explain to a landowner why there's 15 pages of a conservation easement when we're, trying to extinguish development rights?
Yeah, and 15 pages is short.
How long is yours?
I think our template is probably in excess of 20 at this point. I think its specificity is to some degree what has gone on. In the older easements, there was a lot of what we call gray area. Not a lot of definition about the restrictions or the allowable uses. So a lot of the work that has been done recently is to clarify that, and it's just longer. I think also, like you mentioned, when you do involve different funders, many conservation, if you're doing a purchase conservation easement, you will sometimes have funders. So grant funders that would come in, state programs, usually LCHIP, NRCS, Fish and Game, any of the funding programs that are out there, they'll have their own required language and process that they have to stick into your conservation easement deed. That dictates how that easement is done and who you report to and what are the restrictions or the consequences should things fail. All that gets kind of repeated for their entity, usually the state or the federal government. So you almost double up what you're doing, both for your information, your legal information that you would have in there. So it can get complex, and tying together 2, 3, 4 sometimes funding sources, it can get very complex. So you can get some complex, difficult for the landowner, and difficult for stewarding it. So again, going back, our goal is always to do it as least complicated and lowering the risk as possible with doing conservation easements.
And I'll ask one more question and then open it up to everyone else. So how similar are the different land trusts in terms of their easements and language? Like, is everyone using a national template with some of their own tweaks, like between the Nature Conservancy and Forest Society and CELT? Are there major differences, or would one type of conservation project lend itself better to one group, land trust versus another?
I would certainly say that most state groups have a very similar conservation easement. It's a lot of it has been based off the Forest Society's template easement for years. Each group will tweak that to their own preferences, but we are constantly working on our easement language with the other groups. So it is I just spent hours reworking our easement with CELT and Monadnock Conservancy and Upper Valley Land Trust, not necessarily to get those so that they look the exact same, but trying to make sure that we are all working off the best knowledge about how to craft certain sections. TNC is a little different. It's a national organization, has its as a template easement. I worked for TNC for years. Has a template easement that they utilize that looks slightly different, but overall it's the same structure and it's the same restrictions. Again, it really gets into the difference or the different look of it is when you get into some of the programs. The USDA NRCS has essentially their easement is required, and you need to work off of their template, and it does look different. Not entirely, but different.
Thanks.
Questions, anyone?
I'll go.
Paul? Oh, I'm sorry.
So I know you said these are like 15 to 20 page easements, but are you able to just sort of give us like the, 4 or 5 salient points that would comprise the,
Sure.
great.
Yeah, I mean, basically they're broken into several parts. They are what you can do and what you can't do. So your primary function on most conservation easement is to limit or eliminate future residential or commercial development, subdivision, separate conveyance of tracts, and then also disturbance of the natural resources. So mining, topography alteration, blocking water, impacting water, wetlands, other things like that. That's your primary, what they call use limitations. And then on the other side, there are reserved rights for what the landowner can do. A conservation easement is not an acquisition of the property outright. It is meant to be a tool that is designed to allow a landowner to continue to utilize their land. And in many cases, commercial utilization. So commercial agriculture, commercial forestry, subject to written plans, management plans, are typically allowed. And then there are other rights that can be worked into it. Certainly for the Forest Society, we do allow for some solar for the residential use or the business use of the farm. We don't, and we carve out if it is for a commercial entity. Some other small scale commercial uses like agritourism, things of that nature, you can still do with certain restrictions as to how they're done and where they're done. So in general, you're going to find the easements are very similar on those factors of what they allow and what they permit the landowner to continue to do.
And it sounded as though you're moving, and maybe I misunderstood, but you're moving more towards acquisition, if I heard you correctly?
Yeah, I would say the Forest Society, even though we have 780 easements, we've always been leaned towards our own ownership of lands. That's why we have 65,000 acres. And in the past, we probably did almost 1 million acres, and that has been transferred to the state and others. So that has always been a preference for the Forest Society, is to own the land. Our lands are open to the public for all uses on hunting, hiking, fishing, anything other than motorized wheeled vehicles. So that has been our preference, the tool that we've used, I would say, the most in our history. But we certainly, I'm not suggesting that we don't do conservation easements. They still make up over half on a yearly basis of what we do.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, it would make sense, like from a town standpoint, from a cost factor to be, considering easements with more priority, I assume.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, I understand there is a caution about taking land off the tax rolls. Forest Society doesn't take the land off the tax roll. Those lands are still on the tax rolls. We pay current use on all our lands. For a town, I think it's a little different. So there's usually some sensitivity of towns acquiring land and taking it off the tax roll, even if it is just for current use. But you have to weigh that with your conservation objectives. What is it better to have? Is it better to have an easement? Are you going to have public access to that easement? Are you going to be able to have an infrastructure, public trails? Is the natural resource so unique or precious that you want to have ownership and more control of it? So again, that's where I would argue you really have to look at each project. In some cases, lands aren't open. They're not ready. The landowners aren't willing to get rid of their land. They're willing to conserve it, but they're not willing to sell it. So it's a case by case scenario. I would urge you not to, one, eliminate any tool, and then two, not eliminate any partner. I think that's the other thing to think about is, you're lucky here in the Seacoast, you have several good partners. You also have federal agencies and state agencies that would work with towns as well.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Yep.
Essentially, your question was what I was going to ask, but what role do you guys see as a nonprofit doing easements that you guys specialize in that maybe the towns can't do as well? Like, where do you think our town can focus our energy more on conserving that isn't being picked up, I guess, by other agencies or groups in the region? Like, what kind of property, what kind of easement should a conservation commission look at?
Yeah, I think what you're going to find, it's not necessarily what kind. It is often who's the best partner, who's the best to do the project. In some cases, it's just we are all so busy and so loaded with projects that we cannot do those projects. We don't have the capacity to take on Forest Society work statewide. We have 3 people doing statewide. We have, I think, 42 active projects right now statewide, and it's difficult for me to take on projects, and often I have to prioritize. And I think you're going to find that with SELT, and I think you're going to find that with TNC or Moose Mountains or the other groups. Everybody are working at capacity, so often it is who can take on the project and who can partner with it. So in some cases, it may only be the option that the town takes that on. I do think that in some cases there is, more pressure on the conservation organizations to take on the more complicated projects, the ones that do require state and federal funding programs, the ones that do require matching up 3 or 4 different funding sources, the ones that are more complex for the landowner. Simply because we have the professional staff to monitor. So, I don't want to suggest a nice gentleman or lady that comes forward with 100-acre donated easement that doesn't have a house on it or doesn't have any creative restrictions. That might be a perfectly good project for a town to take on. It is low risk. It is uncomplicated. It is available, easy probably to monitor and steward. But I'm not suggesting that towns don't take on the big complicated projects. If they have that capacity or they can work with partners or legal counsel or others to do that, we know that towns are doing some very complex projects right now. So
Anything else?
I'm not giving you any bright lines, but that's my point, I guess.
Any questions from the audience? Don't move the mics. They're wired in. There used to be.
Hi. So I wanted to know 2 things. One is, where does your $5+ million endowment come from? And the other thing was, how, if you only have 5 people monitoring the 700, that's like 150 each people that you have working for, that's like 2 a week or something. So does it not take much to go and walk through these? They must be in really good shape, I guess is what I'm saying. That seems like an awful small staff for that big of a projects.
Yeah,
That number,
twofold.
are you at capacity or something, or How many
We're
new
we're
ones?
close, yes.
Yeah, and how many new ones do you add a year? How many new? So where does the
Okay.
endowment come from?
So the funding is all private, that comes in, or funds that have been raised through the project grants. In some cases, like LCHIP now does cover stewardship expenses. So if you're doing a project where LCHIP funded you, you can take, $5,000 or $10,000 from that and put it into your endowment. But I would say 95% of ours has come from private donations,
So not from the
that
state
has
or
been
anything?
used.
No.
Excuse me?
Not from the state or anything?
No, the LCHIP program now does that, but no, we do not get any state or federal money for our endowment work.
That's awesome. And what is your
Um,
capacity? 800?
So the conservation easements, we have a pretty complex conservation easement program. We have the conservation easements are not all monitored every single year on the ground. They're on a rotational basis. We actually categorize our easements. So we hold a lot of easements on town projects where we were the backup or we were the primary on a town forest being acquired and they had an easement as a match. So we have hundreds of that. We have 100 of those alone. So in some cases, we will put a category 1 on that and they will be monitored once every 3 years. We do satellite aerial monitoring every single year on every single property. But we have a rotational basis for our on the ground monitoring with our staff. Our staff do about 110 to 120 a year each. So it is very heavy in their workload. Our field season has grown pretty substantially. We can monitor easements now almost 9 months out of the year, where it wasn't the past when climate change was around,
Okay.
before climate change was really
One
hitting.
final question is, what do you do about, if you're monitoring from the sky or whatever, what do you do if somebody's obviously violating the conservation? Like what's the process?
So there's a host of processes. The first thing that we do, if we either from our monitoring or from our on the ground monitoring or from our aerial monitoring, the first thing we're going to do is schedule a visit and go look at the property or have a conversation with the landowner about the issue. You're always trying to resolve violations with the landowner and try to come to a conclusion as to how to either fix whatever the violation is or solve or stop the violation. If it is severe enough, we will be getting into a more formal process where you're having to work with that landowner, usually with our attorney involved, to have whatever is impacted, mitigated, usually restored. If it is, let's just say if they dug out a wetland, having that repaired, or if there was the vast majority of our easement violations are encroachments by neighbors. I would say most, not the landowners. You work with your landowners on a very frequent basis to ensure that you don't get violations. And the better your communication with your landowners, the fewer the violations that you'll have. It is almost universally the neighbors that we run in.
Bob, I'm sorry, Bruce had his hand up. Can I come back to you? Okay, Bob.
Thanks. I was wondering if this $5,000 to $10,000 is what you would typically seek on these, or is this just the amount that LCHIP has allotted for you?
Yeah, that's LCHIP. We currently, this is always an ever-changing thing. We put aside $20,000 for every easement and then $5,000 for legal defense. So we have a separate legal defense fund that we also have. So the endowment fund can be used for legal defense, but it also funds things such as our staff in that. But the legal defense is a revolving legal defense fund that we use simply to pay our legal fees involved in a violation. So for us, the total number that we're setting aside at the moment is about 25,000. Sometimes that can go up if it is an extremely complicated project. And sometimes that goes down.
I was also wondering if you ever get in disputes with towns.
Yes. Yeah, actually, quite a bit. The Forest Society did a lot of projects with towns. I mean, in particular, it was kind of in fashion to have the Forest Society hold your easement on a town forest. A lot of this was done before many of the regional groups were established. So I think now a lot of those easements are being done in conjunction with the Celts and the Upper Valley Land Trust and the Osmond Sargent Land Trust. But those regionals didn't exist about 25 years ago. So we hold an awful lot of projects with towns. Some of those predated even easements and their deed restrictions. And some of those are very vague, very undefined about what can be done and what it can be done by the town. So in a weird way, we have I would say, a pretty active effort to work with our towns that we hold restrictions on the town forest or town properties. And in some cases, these are town properties that have multiple uses to them. So ball fields and, DPW sites and sand pits and things of that nature. So they're pretty complex because they were gifted by individuals for the benefit of the town, but also wanting conservation balanced in there. So some of the town projects are the most complicated.
So you may have heard that we have we had a warrant article for a bond of about $3 million, and asked sometimes to pay this fee, this $20,000 to $25,000 fee, and I assume we're going to share some responsibility in holding the easement. Is it fair to assume that that money could be used against us if we're essentially taking money from the town, giving it to someone else? Is it fair to say that they might use that money against us, or could use that money against us?
I would, Matt, if you are the owner of the property and you've had an easement placed on it with an other outside entity, yeah. But that's probably not the structure you're talking about. If you are working in conjunction with a conservation organization like Forest Society or CELT or TNC, if you're contributing to the cost of a project, whoever is designated to enforce the easement is working with the landowner, not with the other entities that helped assist that project. So it depends on the structure of the project, I would say. If you're owning the property, but then having a cross easement on top, yes, you might be in that scenario.
So yes, it's possible.
Possible, sure. If you're in that unique scenario. Yep.
Anyone else from the audience? Bruce?
Yes, I have a question. Questions on you well described and understand. So the Forest Society is self-funded, or you come up with private donations. But some of the other regional players that the town has been involved in the past, like CELT, you probably be unfair to ask you this question, but I was just wondering, from a state and local funding source, or state and federal sources, over the next 3 to 5 years, does it look like there's more money, about the same money coming? Or look like these programs are going to be continued to be supported from the state and federal agencies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're right. For the most part, your membership or donation supported for your operating expenses, your staff, your building, things of that nature. Where grants come in is for programming and or land conservation, and in some cases, very small stewardship. So with the grant programs that are out there, yes, right now there's quite a few options for funding for land conservation, whether that be the state or federal programs. That ebbs and flows over time, kind of comes and goes. Many of those programs have time periods. Let's just an example. There is the Inflation Reduction Act passed a bunch of funding that came through both some of the federal partners. And we're coming to the 5th year of that, and that money is gone. So those programs will sunset or will be empty. Things like the LCHIP program has a dedicated funding source. So while it's not a lot of money, it's a couple million for the entire state for land conservation, might be 3. That is a yearly funded, but it has to do with the fees that are charged for recording fees. So it ebbs and flows based on how much money and how hot the real estate market is. Similar with some of the other programs. So I think the answer to that is yes, for the foreseeable future. I think there will be funding grant programs that are there for doing land conservation. How robust they will be will ebb and flow.
Thank you. Rob, yes.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian. This has been really informative and we appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be knocking on your door more often now that we know who you are and where you live.
Yeah. Happy to be involved.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Happy to answer. If anyone has any follow-up questions that they want to email me, I'm happy to answer those or jump on a phone call.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.
I have his
Do we have to
email.
click him off or?
No, he should log out himself, hopefully.
So we're still broadcast, okay, we're still broadcasting.
Yeah, is it
Good.
blinking? Should be on that little,
He's accepted.
yeah, okay. Does he?
Okay,
Yeah,
I think we're
it's fine.
okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda are guests from representing the Prescott Project.
I would like to
I'm sorry.
recuse my voting membership because our select board is here now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's fine.
that's fine. That's
Yep.
fine.
I don't know if I have to announce that. I don't know.
I don't think it matters.
Sure.
I don't think it matters.
It's,
We voted in, right? So
Right.
we, like,
Yeah.
vote.
yeah, you can opt out.
I will.
No problem.
So I'd like to introduce our two guests here. We have,
Here, so now that.
however you want. Where would you like, facing us or facing the screen, what's best?
Oh, the camera's back there.
I think it's like
Yeah, the
required of me.
camera's-
Yeah, maybe on the side there.
If anyone wants to come up and look,
Well, if I were to do this, then
we can.
you can't see it.
We can.
Our packet
Not all of them. Okay.
Well, we do, but it's
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to come up and observe, please do. Standing is Brendan Quigley from Go Environmental, who met with us last month. And we asked for a summary and some more information. He was gracious enough to do that. And working with him today is Bruce Scammon from the Manual Engineering, the firm that designed the overall plan. So both are available to answer questions. So yes, welcome to both of them.
Thank you. I have some handout because I'd only submitted what I submitted through email, so
Yep.
I did not print it out.
That's
Yeah, so thanks again, Brendan Quigley, I'm with the Environmental Road Scientist, certified in New Hampshire, and we've been working with Manual and our Prescott on this for some time now. We're getting near the end. Last time we really kind of got into the difficult, sometimes confusing topic of prime wetland impacts. What's required, what's being asked of you. So I've tried to summarize that in the letter I submitted, which I'll go through in a minute here. But first, a quick update. Between last month's meeting and tonight, as a result of some stormwater questions from AOT, Bruce and his team did make some minor revisions, none of which changed the overall project, but they did importantly relate to what's happening in this back area. So as a result of that, we have less wetland impact and a little bit less of the prime wetland buffer impact that we're discussing. Importantly, those reductions occur to wetland that is also partially in the prime wetland buffer. So it's sort of an important area, as well as some very small reductions along the routine. So, as I described in my letter, the approach that I took with the prime wetland impacts is essentially a two-pronged approach. And those are basically to demonstrate, which I feel is a fairly strong argument, that the impacts that we're proposing to the prime wetland buffer, which is shown in purple on this most recent plan, will not affect the functions and values of the prime wetland. And there's a number of reasons for that, which relate to the functions and values that were originally identified in the documentation when the prime wetland was designated, as well as some of the project-specific features. You know, I also have a figure in there which I don't have on the plan, which provides an overlay of sort of what this looks like now. And it essentially constitutes the area that was behind the castle's development. Small area of pavement, but mostly you know, semi-maintained field. I believe at one time it probably was better maintained than it was in later years, but essentially a field. So that the functions and values of that sort of area relate largely to water quality benefits, which are, you know, that's one of the primary features of the project improvements. So I offer that as a reasoning, at least in part, for, you know, the functions and values of the prime wetland not being impacted by the didn't discuss in detail last time. We did also submit a waiver, and the waiver essentially outlines that what I just discussed. That if the project does not impact the functions and values of the prime wetland, a waiver is available for impacts like this, which then would not require mitigation. And that's both this and the mitigation aspect, which I'll get to in a minute, you know, are similar to any impact that would be proposed in the dredge and fill for the state, which the Conservation Commission could comment on. It differs, the prime wetland impacts differ in that the state is really looking for consensus on those issues. So in the case of the waiver and the functions and values, what the state will be looking for, and what I'm respectfully requesting, is that you would consider those impacts and state of the property, what's being done by way of the design, that the result will not be an impact to the function. I can add to that as well, the impacts to the prime wetland buffer are incurred by this stormwater surrounding I don't think I knew last meeting, but I've since confirmed that this can in fact be vegetated with appropriate native species seed mix, such that it would actually replicate the proceeds. So that's an addition. Now, the second prong of my approach to dealing with this application, should the commission disagree with that first functions and values waiver approach, in whole or in part, is this proposed mitigation. Now, the property is really constrained as far as having the easement right along the back. Really this project, or probably most projects, the existing development and the adjacent field is really what needs to be projects work on the site. So it also precludes doing a sort of the normal sort of what we look at first for mitigating prime wetland buffer impacts would be something along the lines of restoring a buffer in an area that was degraded on property. We don't have a lot of opportunity to do that. The buffer only actually comes out to just here, and the rest of the property is already in conservation. And it's essentially, there's some older disturbance, but it's essentially things that we can prevent. So, given that, you know, I do cite a couple of improvements which I think lend themselves to mitigate the potential impacts. Sort of a different way of looking at the function and values aspect. And that would be, you know, the improvements in stormwater management at the site that we have a lot currently. So there'll be some really good improvements in stormwater management, as well as subsurface. This one, over leach field, it's being taken out of service, and new systems are installed. That was one of the questions. I couldn't answer exactly last time what the nature of that. Bruce would be happy to answer any questions. But things like that have a big impact on water. So with those two things, I feel like I would argue that the project is largely self-made, considering that if there's going to be any function of bias impacts they would essentially be mitigated by the project itself. As a fallback plan, you know, an additional amount, additional contributions to the ARM fund, which is being used for the rest of the impacts on the site, would be
An alternative
an
or
alternative.
in addition to?
Well, if we were to propose mitigation for the prime wetland buffer impact, it would be an additional amount tacked on to whatever is required for the direct wetland impacts.
I think what's being asked is, you've proposed to do some things that you think are gonna positively impact the water. And I think what Becky is asking is, if you went the ARM route, your product resource mitigation route, would you still do those things? Is it an either or an and?
It would be those elements of the project that I described, so that's subsurface improvements, stormwater management improvements, as well as revegetating the swale as much as practicable and still have it be a function of stormwater management, are all part of the project, and that's not going to change. So the ARM fund is really, if the waiver request is denied. That would, I guess I should probably first ask that be a first consideration. It's the waiver request. But if there's any, any disagreement in whole or in part, and I suppose it doesn't have to be, we don't feel that there's any merit at all to what you're saying about functions and values. It could be like we largely agree with you, but we feel there's some additional mitigation. I tried to summarize that. That's basically it. And we need your input for DES on either of those cases. For the waiver, specifically be looking for concurrence that the project will not impact prime wetlands. And in the case of additional mitigation, they'd be looking for concurrence that the Conservation Commission feels that's appropriate. Taking into consideration the limited opportunity on site.
Is there a question from the table?
Yeah. You say you have reduced the overall impact. The last given one is the 7,700 square feet. What is the new number, or is that the new?
For
The impact on the prime wetland. You said you made some minor tweaks on the retention
Yes.
wall and then the wetland area zone A. Overall impact, does that reduce that total impact, or are they just less impacted somehow?
the prime wetland buffer has been reduced by 500 square feet.
Okay.
The total wetland impact, I put in my letter 2,500, but as I was sitting here, I did remember that I had only subtracted that area, but there were some other small areas too. So the total reduction is 2,680 square feet of wetlands from the revised zone.
From the prime wetland buffer, or from the overall?
The prime wetland buffer is
Just the 500.
2,600 and what?
2,630. Is the reduced correct one.
Any other questions from the table?
The waiver you wish us to comment on is in regard to the ARM funds?
Now, the waiver specifically deals with the prime wetland
Buffer.
You're asking for a waiver that property owner is allowed to request a waiver for those two things, the forestry activity and for other activities on the property. And then the bar for that is that the activity in the buffer should not have impact on the functions and values of the prime wetland as identified in the original. So I realized I hadn't discussed that much. It wasn't the initial thing we got months ago. But I reattached that information. And that has in it the original form from Mark West. And when you go through it, and I actually did talk to Mark about this site. Largely, a lot of these functions and values are really related to there is sort of a catch-all for the general habitat in the wooded swamp. So that would be what applies here. But, the existing field area does not, in my view, contribute currently to that function, which I think is important.
Ron?
Thanks. Did you want to go first, or?
No,
Okay,
please.
thanks. So talking about the mitigation, I'm not sure I'm qualified to say whether a waiver is appropriate or not, and that whatever you're proposing is similar or better to prior, but, so the alternative would be doing something on site, which could take the form of something like controlling invasives or some other positive thing to happen in the wetlands, or to put money into the ARM fund. Do you know how much money we're talking about if we ask for mitigation?
Yeah, there's a, I don't know that I know wrong. There's a spreadsheet that you plug in.
Any ballpark, 5 grand, 10 grand, 100 grand?
It's gonna be probably on the order of $50,000. Said it's for 7,000 square feet. And it could be, part of my reason for doing this as the twofold approach is because I'm also not sure
Could you suggest, could there be other sorts of mitigation besides like conserving uplands or something? You know, could there be fixing a culvert in the back or
Yeah,
invasives or any of those sort of things
that's
for
where it gets-
$15,000 worth?
That's where it gets a little tricky. With, you know, so regular wetland mitigation, you know, you do technically have these other options. The kind of stuff you were talking about with Brian, you can do projects that would improve or restore wetlands. But what they're looking for, if we were to do anything on site for the specific wetlands, would be specific. So I guess the answer is possibly, but again, we're limited to a very small area of the site. Now, if there was something really clear to do, by the way, or something on this road or something, that's not easy. So, and it's all in the easement, so we could require something more to, you know, feasible. But it's all woods.
So just one more follow-up. Do you need approval from the Conservation Commission to do this work in the buffer? Or did the planning board already, or the zoning board make an allowance?
It has, I don't believe, and maybe we should clarify, nothing to do with ordinances. This is fully for state. But to answer your question directly, I guess, yes, we do need either concurrence on the waiver or concurrence on suitable mitigation. And again, I think someone also asked last time, you know, what if we say no? There is a public, DES will then hold a public hearing, I believe. So there is a process which, if there's no agreement, which something could move forward for further consideration. I think we hope to not get to that point. I think we, you know, if we were almost at that point, I think we'd probably go back.
Some of these questions, even mine are general questions, and I'd like to hear what Bruce has to say before we answer too many more, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Might take the boards and put them up front, so I think I'm gonna be talking about more specific things, and members of the audience might,
Bruce, are you gonna be speaking to the waiver, Bruce?
What?
Are you gonna be speaking to the waiver request?
I wanna talk about, yeah, a little bit.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna go right up to the center, because then everybody in this table's gonna end up front. And, see exactly what I'm thinking and talking about. Be able to see it on camera also. Thank you, members of the public. My name is Bruce Scammon for the Manual Engineering and James Barrett Associates. Here representing R.E. Prescott and their development. I wanted to start with the existing conditions, because I think understanding what's out there today, previously, and what's changed and what's out there today, compared to what's going to be trying to move forward, is an important part of understanding the big picture. So previously, as most people recall, there was a set of buildings known as the castles that was in disrepair. The whole site was in disrepair. There was really no water treatment on site. Probably all of us have seen this pond and seen it in very silted in and in poor quality. That water was directly flowing through the swale into the wetlands. So we were road water coming off the highway and off the site, was all making it into the system. Several of the catch basins that had deep sumps had been poured in with concrete, so those were not working. So everything was just pouring across the surface and getting into the pond and flowing into the wetlands. I think that's an important thing to note, what the way it is today and the detriment that it's doing to the environment and to the wetlands, the way it currently was and is. Our project had the goal of putting a very large building and a lot of parking into an area that's, the town has a very small area for industrial type uses and commercial uses. So we were tasked with trying to squeeze as much as we could on this site. We have done several things to minimize that. This building is a 3-story building, so that they can have more uses than trying to just spread out on a single-story building. We researched parking. We looked at other industrial buildings in town. We worked with the planning board. We have about 200 less parking spaces.
When we timed out.
Oh, okay. We're on. We're on. I think so.
So the original plan that we came forward, and that we started to work with DES and the planning board, had basically retaining walls at the edge of the development area. We had close to 70,000 square feet of wetlands impact. That made it a little easier. There was more room around the corner. We could have more entrances into the building. But we started talking with Brendan and Globe Environmental and trying to figure out, what would the impacts be. So we started to cut back and squeeze as much as we could around this building, so we'd have less impact. So in that first change or go around after the first project, we basically cut it in half. So we got it down to about 35,000 square feet of impact. The goal was to get it below an acre, and we got it about 8,000 to 9,000 square feet less than that. A lot of the impact is pond. That's about 20,000 square feet. And then the swale or raceway that runs out to the wetlands is a good chunk of the rest of that. Talk about the numbers specifically. The pond, like I said, is wetland B is 20,490 square feet. These two areas here, we call those areas C. There's 2 different types of wetlands we're impacting, but it's approximately 7,700 square feet of wetlands impact. And then we have a 5 square foot wetland impact here, which is temporary. When we build the retaining walls, it's within that buffer where we're going to be putting in silt sock. We figured that that little corner or the tip of that wetlands might be temporarily infected, but we're not having a direct impact on that. And then there was the buffer. The prime wetlands are here in blue or purple, and there is a 100-foot setback to that, which is the buffer, which by DES standards is considered wetlands, and we need to pay an impact fee for anything we touch in that also. So these all used to be further out. We direct impacts. It used to be all the way along here. We removed a parking spot up in this corner, just so that we wouldn't have that impact. So we've tried to squeeze as much as we can and try to fix that up. We also are putting in a very expensive retaining wall so that we have immediate, we can maximize that use, but also minimize our wetlands impact. So traditionally, this site we're approximately bringing up on average about 4 feet. That is so we can do our treatment that we'll get to in a minute. So we have to take, it's about 8 to 10 acres that we're gonna be bringing up 4 feet. So it's a significant amount of fill and material and investment to bring that up because of the water table. It's so close on this in this area. As many of you that have been in town a long time know, this used to be a campground. I recall as a kid. There's the old concrete areas out here where there were swimming pool areas. They went out into the back and had campsites. Then in the 80s, they had the renovation into the castles, and now it's another impact. So this whole area has been impacted multiple times in the last 3 generations of this site. So we are doing as much as we can with the retaining walls to minimize that exterior at great cost to our clients. The next thing I really want to talk about is the drainage itself. Our drainage system, we're really going to sort of next level drainage. All of the personal cars for the site, this whole strip of pavement along the front is all porous pavement. Porous pavement, if you're not familiar with it, is a treatment system in itself, and it's storage. So what happens is, if you get ponds like what we have here, you can get a lot of mosquito larvae and water treatment. You can get triple E or other infectious disease with mosquitoes. So I like to design as much as we can with porous pavement and bioretention ponds, so that we can treat water. So all of these structures have sand filters in them. So the water will drop through, go through a sand filter, so we can break down nitrogen from ammonia or whatever else down to from nitrite down to nitrate. What DES has asked us as part of the last renovation is not only do that, but now we have to line all of these ponds, collect all of the water, and in these two, we're doing something called an ISR, which is essentially an underground artificial wetlands, so we can take it from nitrate to nitrogen gas. So the nitrogen gas will then go off into the atmosphere. So it's an anaerobic process, it has to be an aerobic process. So all of our regular treatment systems are through an aerobic process, and now we've taken the next level, going to an anaerobic process after that. So what? Yes.
So just underneath, we happen to have a presentation on stormwater management and what the planning board. When you say storage, are there gonna be like tubes or things? No, it's all gonna just by grade.
As much as I can, I don't like to design those because they either collapse, they get filled with silts or something like that. So as much as I can, this is all just stone, crushed stone underneath, because the water can find its way. It doesn't have to make it through a pipe. We do have pipes here to help facilitate that, but the stone just naturally also flow. Sometimes I think that the anaerobic process can be a little overkill for the type of nitrogen that we're dealing with and the amount of nitrogen. But because I think it's very important also to have infiltration into the water. By doing the DES process, they are asking us, we will reduce and stop that. So there won't be any infiltration in any of the bioretention areas. And now, all the water, after it sits and goes through the anaerobic process, will then be released into the wetlands. Now, on this site, it may not make that much of a difference since if it infiltrates here, it's most likely it's going to be coming out here anyways. It just has to go through the soil horizontally. But it's a much more in-depth process. We'll be buying several acres of poly, similar to what you'd be putting in a landfill to basically make a bathtub underneath all of these structures to catch all the water and put it back into these ISR systems that will make the nitrogen gas go up. It's quite interesting because traditionally, you pick up nitrogen as you're flowing across surfaces. DES on commercial sites now makes us treat water that comes off the roof. So off the roof, usually you don't have any nitrogen, but we're now having to design for water falling from the sky, picking up nitrogen in the atmosphere, because nitrogen is 70+% of the atmosphere. So it's picking up nitrogen in that fashion to make the design for that reduction of that nitrogen. Put it back in the sky so that we can catch it with our rain again next time. But it's what we do today and the reason we have to do that, DES told us before we started this process that we didn't have to, is anything within a quarter mile of the fresh river, because the fresh river feeds into the Wiscasset River, is why we have to do that. And originally, it was just this corner caught the edge, and they told us you don't have to deal with the denitrification of the water. But with the new regulations that just came out in May, after I think we had already presented to the planning board, I believe that the prime wetlands now is included as part of that. Is the way I've had it explained to me. And even though our application went in right at that time, which then stretches mile basically to 101. So it's a big hurdle that, and a big expense that our client will have to go through. My guess is it's probably $1 million extra in development of this. So I know that we're talking about a $15,000 thing. DES just put a $1 million price tag onto this project to get the water cleaner. And I can guarantee you, there's nothing on this site today that even comes close to anything to make this water going into the prime wetlands any cleaner than what we're going to do through this process.
So does that solve the buffer zone problem?
To me, as an engineer, the water is much better than the way it is today. If you went out there today, or you went out there a couple of years ago, the first time I was on this, well, it wasn't the first time I was on the site, first time for this project I was on the site, you would find that there was, people had come and been dumping bricks and debris, and, they'd gone behind there was a loop road that runs through here, and then stuff dumped all through here. And so by having this project, you're not leaching out any of those things that are out there.
Yeah.
There's mold issues in all these buildings, and the bad air, and so it's a complete change to the environment. What we're doing here, is it a large impact? Absolutely. Is it something that's positive? I think absolutely also. I mean, not to say all the things that it's going to do for economy and bring in jobs and other things, but for the environment, I think this. I grew up on a dairy farm. I've seen a lot of waste. I've seen a lot of things. This was gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
professional assessment.
But that's what I was looking at when I was out on site. And, so I just thought, I'll open it up, I guess, to questions on how I can help. Oh, one last thing. Brendan had talked about the leach field. So the existing leach field actually is off this site. As you've gone down, some of you may remember there was an open area here, it's now grown up into some sumac. Well, that's the existing leach field. And when I did the test bits, I went out with Mike Cuomo. I assume all of you know Mike from the Conservation District, does the reviews for the town, the test bits. We went out to do it because we were thinking that we could replace the field out here. When we walked out to the site, there was the mound from the leach field, there was a slope down, and the wetlands were right there. There was standing water at the bottom of the slope. And so we both agreed that we would not design a field here, even though that was specifically laid out for a leach field and has been used for the last 40 years, all 40 years since 84, 85, for the whole castles. And some of us remember when there was restaurants and other things, and I'm sure we're pumping a lot of waste into it. So that's why the highest point on the site is right over here, in the corner of the parking lot. And so our leach field is right in this highest point right here. We did have to get a waiver because of the proximity of this wetlands to the edge of that. It met the state regulations, I think we were 55 feet. And then it said in the town regulations it was 75. But it's the only place, every place else, the water table is very close to the surface. And so this was the only place that you could really have good treatment for that. There was an old space way back out in the woods, in the conservation easement. It was originally supposed to be leach fields for the castles. We did go out and look at that location. It was cleared for the leach fields. It actually looked like they had brought a lot of fill out there for the leach fields, but it didn't look like they were ever built. So that was the other, Hail Mary possibility for a leach field. But when we found this on a corner, we felt that was probably the best idea. And that keeps it away from all this porous pavement and the infiltration that we were originally had designed it for.
Questions for Bruce?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm speaking for myself now. Planning board, they gave 50 days conditional approval on the site. We felt, and I think we can even explain, that line there on the wetland is probably about 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet.
That's ballpark. The building itself is 750 feet.
Right.
So
About 1,000. And, for us who've lived in town all our lives, we've seen for the last 40 years, all that water, as Bruce has explained, run right off from 101 and kind of sheet flow across the site, right into the wetlands. So when the planning board saw that retaining wall all along the back edge of the property with all that water being diverted into stormwater systems, that was a game changer in terms of what the property, the advances in the quality of water on the property. Another thing I think most of you are aware of, it was brought up last meeting, that 2/3 of this whole parcel is in a conservation easement at the present time. Our town-wide citizen survey there a year ago, number two, other than the rural character, number two concern of people in town was expansion of our commercial industrial zone. And Brentwood as a town is 3/5 wetland overall. We're very, very constrained in terms of the amount of land that is within our commercial industrial zone. So to us, this is a very important project to go on and be the first really tax benefiting project that I've seen in 40+ years on the planning board. And so the minor amount of incursion to me is offset by the stormwater control that will be in place as a result of this project going forward. So again, I strongly support the waiver request. I think that, it's just a win-win for the town on a number of fronts. But certainly, largely, the stormwater control is a very, very important part of that project.
Any other points you would like to, thank you, Bruce. Any other points, Bruce, that you need to make or want to make on this project?
No, I don't think so. We did, just so you know, work with DOT. There was some turning lanes, which we slid the driveway slightly, so we didn't have the impact on wetlands on this side since last board meeting also. Just to work with DOT, and then by making the turning lane, it made the driveway closer, or the lane closer, which for fire trucks and tractor trailers. So it was some slight changes in the plan, but overall it's the same basic plan.
I've also walked the site, and I will concur with your pond assessment that it's very much more of like a mud pit than a functioning pond of any sort. And I've also walked the back part of the lot, or especially the mowed field-ish part. And I mean, you guys have there's a photo of like an actual visual color picture of that back corner of the lot, and I've walked it. It is much more grass field, compacted like dirt road than wetland. That's where our prime wetland buffer is. I think you've done a fantastic job explaining your runoff control, and I think that answered a lot of our questions from last time, and I feel a lot more comfort going forward with this project now. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Anything else?
Yeah.
For Bruce, yes, Paul.
Yeah, so and I appreciate, everything you've said tonight, what you said previous at the very helpful information. I'm still trying to weigh this idea of a waiver versus the mitigation, because I think we're being asked to make some recommendation as to one or the other. And I want to get your opinions as to why a waiver would be appropriate and that this would not impact the functions and value of the wetland, if that's your opinion.
Yes. Well, I think what I've tried to lay out is the aerobic and anaerobic biological processes that were taking place in our retention, our porous pavement, in our ISRs is dramatically different than anything else probably that's ever been done in Brentwood or most of the state for that matter. The water quality treatment that we're putting into this is going to make the water better than it is today, better than it would be running off almost any system that's out there. So the impact fees, in my mind, are already being enforced by alteration of terrain due to the Piscasset River, which is probably a half to 3/4 of a mile away. I was out hiking out past the rail trail and came back to the snowmobile trail. It runs and crosses both Piscasset and the Fresh River out to QB Road, and it's a long ways back there before you get to that location. So for us to start putting in clean water versus the water that was coming out of here running off of the road is already an impact. And so I think that alone is enough. And the dollars that's going to be spent there are a huge impact that's going to better the water quality. Now,
Undoubtedly, but I guess really the question I'm still struggling with is, why would we recommend that waiver as opposed to just saying that, these are mitigation, that is, reasonable mitigation?
I think it's just because of mitigations already being done. That's in my mind. I mean, would it be better if this was a field and there was never anything there for the environment? You might throw them back in. Actually, I don't even know if I can say say yes to that. You know, because of the way the water runs off the road.
Mhm.
In a bubble, if there was no road here, yes, let it be in the woods and have animals there. But the whole balance is how do you do design so that it's safest for the environment? And what I'm telling you is, in the 30 years that I've been involved, this is the best thing that I've ever put out for treatment of water. And we did one for TurboCam. It was a little similar up in Barrington, probably about 4 years ago. It had an ISR on it, but it wasn't at all to the scale of this project. So that's my only thing is that what they've already put in and gonna be putting in is better. They're putting in their pound of flesh already, I guess is one way of putting it.
Bob?
What is the revised impact, total impact to the prime wetland buffer? It says you've reduced it by 500 square feet.
7,200, I think is the number.
Yeah, 7,
I'm sorry, not the buffer, just prime wetland. 7,700 for prime wetland buffer is the total amount. What about just prime wetland?
there is no plan.
There's no impact to prime, so you reduced it from 500 to 0?
This blue
Yeah.
is the prime wetland. So there's this whole strip that we're not touching in between.
Yeah.
This green is a regular wetland. We are touching a little bit here, meaning temporary impact like we talked about, and a little bit right here so that we can get all this water to this ISR. I couldn't fit this ISR on this side of the site. So we had to get it over this wetland. So we've already pulled all these, this was all impacted before. So this whole area in here
Yeah.
is where the most of the 7,600 square feet of wetlands impact we reduced. Was also, I think, a little bit in here, with some here. We pulled all of those retaining walls back so that we wouldn't have those direct wetland impacts.
Brendan, is it fair to say that the primary or the largest perhaps purpose of wetland buffer is to treat water before it gets to the wetland?
In this case, that's exactly.
And aren't you saying that you're gonna treat the water better than the wetland probably would anyway, and certainly better than the existing buffer is doing?
Yeah, the buffer.
Yeah.
It's gonna be better, the improvements that are being made in the water quality described, mitigate for and in fact go above
Yeah.
whatever potential impact to water quality would occur from this project.
The state has requirements for buffer, and the town's requirement for impact for buffer is larger, right?
Yeah.
The buffer is larger. And the purpose for that is because we want to protect our prime wetland. But it seems clear to me that we've done that here. I mean, it just seems to me that the purpose of the buffer has been honored, and I'm in favor of this. And if other folks are ready, I'm ready to
Yeah.
vote.
I move that we act favorably on the waiver and concur.
Is there a second? Oh, you can't. Second, any discussion?
I mean, I'm not feeling like I'm totally qualified on the specific waiver for this buffer. I do agree the whole site's gonna be a lot better. And I'm just wondering whether there's not someone in town, either our town planner or town engineer, that could make an affirmative assessment rather than just relying on the developer's staff to tell us that the buffer is acting exactly the same way or better. So,
I can speak to that.
thank you.
You had third-party engineering review on all of this.
Okay, thank you.
And that, so it was through the planning board process, we went through that. Before we added the denitrification process, they already told us that it was better before we added that. So then we had to go to the state review process. So the state alteration of terrain is on their final review. This is what they've asked us to do to even make it better. So it's
That's what
not.
you should have started off with an hour ago.
Well, I think it's important that everybody understands.
Thank you,
Understands
I'm
the-
kidding.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
very
yeah.
much. You guys both have done a very good job tonight.
So, yeah, no, there is third-party review at 2 levels.
Thank you.
That we've been.
So can we restate the motion?
Can I-
Oh, is there another
Sure.
question?
Just
Yes,
what-
Paul.
Yeah, and it sounds like everything, and maybe I'm just hung up on a point that's impertinent, but it sounds like what you're doing is mitigating all of the impacts. So why doesn't this just fall as a mitigation? Is the problem that you don't want to pay the $15,000, amount, or?
So, I admit, it's a bit confusing.
Okay, well, that's
I'm
good.
a- I'm
Because
a-
I'm confused.
I'm making such an effort to address mitigation because it was specifically cited in our question. So, even though we submitted a waiver, they have asked us to talk to the Conservation Commission. I think, yes, there's this component of mitigation might be a contribution to that. But all the stuff we've been talking about tonight is mitigated. The design itself is mitigated.
Why wouldn't our motion then be that mitigation has taken place in a reasonable, manner?
In the design itself.
Right.
I think that's fine.
Well, the request has been for a concurrence or non-concurrence on the requested waiver
But I
for the
just,
buffer
and I
zone.
get, right.
And the basis for the concurrence could well be the mitigation's already happened. And so the motion I made is simply that we concur that the waiver should be approved. And the basis for that is everything we just heard. The mitigation's already taken place.
Well, it will take place.
Right.
That's-
We could,
In the
we could
design.
word it as like.
Yeah.
On the
Will have taken
Yeah.
place.
Just a clarifying question. You already have impacts, direct impacts to wetlands that you're already going to have to pay beyond. So this is only a waiver for the buffer of the prime wetland.
Correct.
And
So do you understand
So-
that part of it?
So waiver of some additional fee, is that?
Right.
So they're already paying arm funds
Yeah, I
for
understand.
these, it's just this chunk.
it's also the case, I believe, that the ARM funds don't go to us.
No.
They go to the state, and actually they're managed by the Corps of Engineers, and they're owned by the Corps of Engineers but managed by the state. And it's unlikely that we'll ever see any of that $15,000.
I don't care about
Right.
that. I don't think they should have to pay it. I'm just trying to figure
Agree.
out what the difference is between a waiver and just, the fact that you're taking reasonable mitigation steps.
I think the easiest way to think, generally, what DES is looking for, rules might say specifically one thing or another, waiver of mitigation. What they're looking for is for the local municipality for them to concur that the proposed impacts are not going to impact the revised wetlands, and/or that the mitigation, whether it be through project design itself or some additional, whether it's on fund or restoration of buffer, those things considered together will not impact. That's essentially where we're really asking you to concur on that point. I think it sounds like we are probably there. It's just
The
just how to
phraseology,
word it.
how to word it.
Well, I think the motion is, I
I
simply
would
move that,
recommend someone secretary.
yeah,
Well,
that,
can you restate it?
yeah, I recommend that the commission concur with concur that the requested waiver should be approved by the appropriate entities.
Second.
Any more discussion? I'd like to take a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. What does that make? That makes that everyone? Okay,
Unanimous?
unanimous.
Good.
You're not gonna ask for more.
No, Bruce is right. I think it would probably serve, but for all purposes, but technically, general support of the project. But we've talked about this in far more detail than we usually would, so I do not suggest that we pull it back.
Just DES, if they see that we generally support the whole project also, because what we did was just talk about the waiver. And all I'm saying is something that says we support the whole project, in the application.
Yeah, and for the, specifically considering the improvements.
I would recommend a second motion that I cannot make
Yeah,
regarding.
Let's phrase it.
I'd move the commission concur and express its support of the entire project.
That was my suggestion.
Well, you should have made that motion a half hour ago.
No, you were set on your motion.
Well, you can second it.
I'm answering the question that was asked. Waiver.
Well, I think they both needed to be made.
Yes. So the phraseology that will go into DES, we have to communicate with them by letter. Ms. Duclos?
Maybe like acknowledging the efforts made by
Yep.
the Prescott Company and Salmon Engineering to mitigate stormwater impacts, and acknowledging their efforts to,
A nice,
honor.
a nice letter.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
honoring the
I think
wetlands.
you were offering to draft it?
No, I'm a
Yeah, I
simple-
think
I'm a
Matt-
simple alternate.
Matt
Yeah.
and I, or Matt and Bob and I will draft. How about that?
Patrick.
You can pass it by me.
So we've.
Draft the letter, sure.
We'll draft a letter.
I mean-
What's the deadline?
Actually, a little bit longer than I thought.
September 20th. Okay, so there's
That's when I
time to
have to
review.
actually submit all that, so,
Okay,
along with all the rest of the other responses.
okay. So that gives us a couple of weeks to work on it, so we will come up with the language that works for the the motions we've just passed. I'll run it by Paul and Patrick and Bob. Well, I'll run it by you
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
So we're in concurrence.
Well, do we need
didn't
a
pass
sec,
the
we want a
second
second motion though,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
we concur with the project design, right? Is that what you're asking?
Absolutely. So the letter says both the waiver and the
And-
project.
And the project design.
Okay.
All right, so I move we concur with the project design.
Is there a second?
Before,
Is there? Okay, any discussion?
are we talking about two letters or one?
One letter.
One letter saying both things.
Yes.
Correct.
I just wanted to be
Yeah.
certain what I was voting on.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous? Okay. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nice job.
Thank
Nice
you
job,
very
guys.
much. Appreciate that.
Great job.
Great job. Yes, thank you both, Brendan and Bruce.
I didn't even know all that.
Thank you for for coming here and spending time with us and giving us the details. It's very appreciated. There's some new people on the commission, so it's helpful to have that background. So thank you again for taking the time, really, truly.
One of the few towns that has a 100-foot prime wetland buffer,
Yes,
so, probably
I think there's,
non-existent.
We're it.
I think there are only 7 towns in the state that have a 100-foot buffer. So thank you. And thank you to the audience for staying with us
Yeah.
for this long.
Half of them.
And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Just getting started, okay. Okay, I'll go through a quick announcement here. We haven't done the minutes. Can we go back to the minutes?
We can.
I would recommend a motion.
Any comments on the minutes? You received them by mail. You have copies in front of you. Anything that needs correction? I think one thing that I saw, Magnuson's name is in here. He has 2 S's in his name.
Where are you?
Page 2, number 2. 4-2.
MAGNUSSON.
SSON, yes.
Okay.
Anything else from anyone? Is there a motion
So moved.
to approve the minutes as amended?
Yes.
A second?
Is that you?
Patrick says,
Aye.
oh, you can't.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Sure. Second.
Paul, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And an abstention from Lise. Okay. Quickly, update. Okay.
Do you
So we've
oppose
done the
minute?
minutes. We've done, there are no bills and reimbursements this time.
I abstain from the
And
Okay.
we've done the presentations by the two guests. An announcement, number 6 on your agenda is that the site walk for the MTI PolyX project at 50 Pine Road has been set. It is August 24, that's a Saturday, at 9 a.m. For those interested in going, please meet at the site. It would be nice to have some representation from conservation. If you haven't done a sidewalk, it's interesting and you will learn a lot. So if anyone wants to volunteer, show up at 9 o'clock on the 24th. That's not this Saturday, it's after.
two.
Okay, 2
Okay.
Saturdays.
August 24th
August 24, that's a Saturday, 9
at
o'clock.
9 a.m.
It's a joint walk with planning board. No chocolates, just donuts? Okay. Old business, the handbook. You received a copy of the draft, the final draft, Matt said, of the handbook. People in the audience have a copy. If anyone needs to look at it, there's a spare copy up here. Are there any suggestions? And I apologize to Emma and to Heather, you saw my notes. I made the copy off of a marked up note. Sorry, that was just my thinking out loud. So, any comments?
I think we should add an appendix that comments on Matt's work.
Oh, no, that's
At
not
least some
necessary.
note, a forenote or an afternote that you
Right.
can write at your own
Right,
discretion.
right.
Even if-
It almost took removal of my appendix to get this done.
Were all of the RSA,
Yeah.
are all of the RSAs verified?
Glenn, yes, Glenn did that with, Rob went with Glenn to verify the RSAs in this document. Regardless of how we pass or vote this tonight, you know this is a document that will continue to be amended or corrected as needed. So it's not set in stone for the next 25 years. So just put that in your brain pan. Yes. Yes. I did have one note under introduction, or the second section, establishment and composition under B. It says, before being nominated for membership or as an alternate.
Where are
Should
you?
we add that? Section 2,
2B?
yeah. You just say membership. Should we add or as an alternate, or
Yes.
yes?
2B
Yep.
is the policy of the commission.
It is the policy of the commission that prospective members attend at least 2 commission meetings or otherwise show their commitment to participate in commission activities before being nominated for membership or as an alternate.
How about nominated as a member or alternate?
Well, nominated for membership would include both regular members and alternate members, wouldn't it?
Does it?
I don't know.
I don't
Would
know.
it?
I can't.
You can speak.
I mean, if we need to change it, I'll change it, but I don't really know that that's.
It's not a
necessary.
legal document.
It's not a
just
legal
Yeah, I mean, right,
general.
right.
Okay,
Right.
that was just one thought. Anything else from anyone?
On appendix 1,
Yeah,
there's a spelling error.
Oh, God.
I believe that should be timber.
Timer, small timer sales,
where is that?
appendix 1.
1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, last sentence.
Good catch.
Oh, timber
Timber
sales, okay.
sales.
Timber,
And
Yeah,
small timer sales.
I would do a lot of things to appendix 3. I was an editor for 19 years, so I would do a lot to that, but not that there's anything incorrect, just grammatical, and
okay. Well, we
I
can,
don't
which
take
I can
offense.
share late, which
Well, you can do the next one.
I can do,
yeah.
I can provide it another
Yeah,
time.
we
I'm
can
not
provide
gonna go
another
through
time.
that
Okay, to
now,
be-
but
To be formatted, how about that?
that's perfect.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? Okay, is no discussion, is there a motion to approve this draft of our manual, handbook? A side note, once we pass judgment on this, it will also go to town council according to Karen Clement, because I know that the planning board document was reviewed by town council.
Does this commission have bylaws, or is this pretty much the only thing we go by?
This is the only thing I found, that we had
Okay.
a handbook. I didn't think we had bylaws.
I've never seen any, so I
No.
didn't.
Okay? So is there a motion?
Yes.
Phrase it.
To approve this as the update for the Conservation Commission handbook.
Is there a second?
Would you recommend the adoption?
Adopt, yeah, to
Recommend
adopt.
the adoption of
right,
this as the
right.
handbook for conservation.
Were you making drafts though? Is that what I heard you say? or-
I would like to redo Appendix 3, yes.
To format it.
I mean, which,
As
as
reformatted.
we've said, this is sort of a living document, so I don't think I think we can approve it tonight,
Could we
and I
just
can
then
submit
approve
changes. Yeah.
Commissioners, changes when she
Yeah.
presents them, so we can move on this and then do that.
So you would move then, subject to those edits being made, or,
So agreed.
okay.
Okay, a second. Lise seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
be easier.
Old business commission. Okay.
I'm gonna do a lot.
No, just like.
Looking at the clock,
It's not the actual
I'd like to do,
or suggested.
I would like to do a report on behalf of the Open Space Subcommittee. We met August 8, and we spent the most of our time working on a plan for the public program. What we decided, with all of us participating and contributing various elements of this to the discussion, the location we're thinking it would be scheduled for the end of September, early October. We have 4 possible dates, which are available at the library, would be the location. We're thinking it would start at 6:30 or 7 for about an hour to an hour and a half. There would be Q&A at the end. It would be a panel presentation by 4 people, 2 landowners, one who placed land in easement and one who purchased land that was already in an easement, a representative from a land trust, and possibly a consultant or another expert in the field. We're working on a letter and an invitation. You have a copy of the draft of the letter in your packet, I believe, which Lise put together and is approved by the Open Space Committee. Robin is working on a brochure or a folder that would be the invitation to attend the presentation at the library. The list of landowners who would receive this would be based on properties who are on a priority list, or based on the size of the parcel, their conservation values, any historical, scenic, or habitat values. We looked at the big map of Brentwood with all the easements in green. I think there's a map out there that shows that. Yes, right there. And we looked at what made sense for adjacent parcels, habitat size, et cetera. So we'll be working on identifying maybe 20 individuals who would receive this letter and this invitation 4 weeks prior to the event. Publicity will be, it'll go on the community calendar on the town website, so anyone is welcome to attend. It's a public program. Facebook, Patrick would be putting something on Facebook. There'll be some posters in public places, library, the school, maybe Lindy's town office. And we're inviting representatives, or we're sending out an invite to other conservation commissions in the area. And Rob put that list together, so we welcome visitors from other conservation groups, as individuals from Brentwood went to the one in East Kingston a few months ago. So that's our plan. This is what we worked out so far. We're going to be meeting on the 28th or the 29th of this month to finalize everything. The invitation will be ready, the list will be ready. It'll be a mail merge, so that's what we're going to go forward with, if there's any questions. That's the report from Open Space. We need to get this out and approach landowners, be proactive. One other aspect on this, Conservation gave approval to forward a contract from a consultant that we've interviewed. That went through Karen Clement to Primex. Primex is our overall insurance provider. They made some recommendations with the consultant approved, and those have been integrated. Open Space is now working on the scope of work, what this individual would do exactly, spelling that out. That isn't final yet, but we're working on that. I've arranged a meeting with the consultant for within the next 10 days to review what we're talking about in a draft. And Robin has agreed to go with me. She has contract experience. She's worked with a lot of contracts, so we're going to see what the potential consultant has to say about that. But then it would come to the committee for review. Any questions about the committee, Open Space? Patrick?
Good
No,
work.
you're good, okay. All set, okay. New business and announcements. There are no new easement inquiries right now. Just for your information, from the Department of Transportation, as Chair of Conservation, I received a notice that a permit has been submitted to DOT. DOT has submitted a permit to spray for invasives on bridges that cross over Dudley Brook and the Exeter River. The state is not, DOT is not required to notify the abutters that this will happen probably in October. They will take all precautions. They will be using traditional invasive products that you hear about in the news all the time. Even though the abutters did not need to be notified, the abutters by Dudley Brook have been. I know one is submitting comments by the 16th of this month when they're due. One other abutter had no problems with it. I haven't heard from the third. So we've done our due diligence to at least notify them if they have any questions or concerns.
That was Dudley Brook, and what was the other?
Exeter River.
Okay.
That wasn't in Brentwood. I think it was the only one in
Dudley
Brentwood,
Brook
I
was the
think.
only
Yeah,
one in
Dudley-
Brentwood?
I believe
Okay.
so.
I think so.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And you notified one of the abutters, so we've done our work there. In your
So-
package,
Pickpocket? Is it where it goes under?
No, it's by Stout Oak Farm where Dudley Brook.
Okay, it goes
Yeah.
under
yeah,
20.
Yeah,
and if you drive by,
under Middle Road.
you can see all the poison ivy
Yeah.
along. The purpose of this is to clear the invasives so they can check the structural integrity of bridges, so there aren't problems that are developing. And it's been done before, and they have the state has passed approval on this. So just to let you know what that was about. In your packet, I believe you have one sheet of possible opportunities. I don't even know if I can find it on mine. NHACC has received funds to pay for interns. I've alerted Deb Briscoe of the Trails Committee to see if there's anything on trails that she might want an intern, to apply for an intern to help with that, but please be thinking of that. The deadline is, I think, in January, so if you have any thoughts, please send them to me. There is an application form online at NHACC. There's an opportunity to attend a workshop on August 23 if you want to learn about easement monitoring. I know Lisa's in charge of that, but if you have questions, you might consider checking into that. And please save the date of November 2 for the next statewide conference of NHACC. I would like a couple people to go. We have funds to pay for that. So please let me know. I think that would be helpful to newcomers to this or to people who have served before. So I plan to go. So let me know. I will set aside money for that. Thank you very much, Matt. Trails. Also, it's been on my mind, and I called Deb Briscoe. Trails kind of falls between conservation and recreation. No one has ownership of it completely. I have walked a few trails with Deb, but I would like to walk the recreation trails with a couple of people to see what they're like and to see if there are any needs or anything we could be thinking about doing with those trails. If someone would go along with me and with Deb. Michelle, okay, and Andy Gray wants to go along as well, representing recreation. So I think we'll set a date.
Should probably have someone from the Lamprey River Bow Hunters as well, because they have
Okay,
Andy's, Andy LaRoche's bow hunter. And
okay, Andy, would you like to go on that? Sure. Okay, thank you. I'll check with all of you for a date that works for everyone. I don't know how long it takes, about an hour and a half maybe.
bring your bow.
Bring your bow. Okay, thank you very much. Just to give you just a little bit of information, I received an email from the Seven Rivers to the Coast, the estuary program in Greenland, Great Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. They've produced this map, which is available there. There's also, you can get the icon to print it and put it on your iPhone or your computer, which is the whole coast of New Hampshire, showing all the state parks, all the boat access, all the features, the visitor centers, anything that would be of interest. It's a great promotion for the seacoast, but it also has a lot of information. You can probably print it on 11 by 17 paper if you don't want to go get one of these big maps. I put a couple in the boxes out there, but it's a very informative, useful document. So if you're interested,
See that?
yep,
Thank you.
please take advantage of that. They're
Coastal
free.
access map, okay.
They're free, and that site is absolutely gorgeous. I walked that today. You can go all the way down to Great Bay. It's gorgeous. Anything from, that's all I have. Anything from anyone on the commission? Rob?
Can we talk about the improvements to the fields that are part of the Split Rock area? We've been talking
Yes.
about that for
Yes,
many, many months. And
yes.
we had caught up a little bit. I had met Kevin Breen, who lives in town, and asked, he has a small business with Brontosaurus and could do a lot of the field work in an excavator. So we talked, and working with Bruce
Yep.
to set a date to remove all the fencing,
Yes,
establish a scope of work. There's a fishing game grant that we could apply for that gives up to $4,000 a year, but you could have up to $10,000 per project. There's other people in town that do similar work. But it seems like the time is ripe to get going as we
Yeah.
get into the fall and it cools down and, to start doing that, setting
Yeah.
dates and applying for a grant. And so I'd like to suggest we move forward.
I'd like to suggest that Rob take on this project to work on the grant. I think that's a great idea, I really do. I drafted a letter and sent it to Karen Clement that would inform the Woodmans that we would like to have the fence removed.
Okay?
I don't know if that letter went out. I will check with Karen tomorrow. I sent it to her
Okay.
about a month ago. But that would be for
But she was
fence
saying that
removal.
you were saying.
No,
The last time.
no, I drafted it, but it shouldn't
Yeah, I
come
think
from
you
us.
need to,
Yeah,
communicate, because there seems to be a miscommunication.
we didn't approve it, the select board did, so that's why I assumed that the select board would have responsibility for making that notification.
I spoke with her, I think she was thinking it was you.
Nothing comes from us.
Nothing comes from us. We
So-
don't have, we're only advisory, we're not,
So realizing it's late, in order to apply for a grant, we need a
Yeah.
scope.
Yeah.
Are we, Bruce, you're probably the best to help us, but, in general, what we want to do is push everything back to the walls, clean up the fields, remove
the underbrush.
logs, things left over from the logging.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an issue, Bruce.
But I keep asking you,
Right, and I asked.
you have to really.
What do you want me to do?
Lick the stamp and put it on.
Yeah.
What's the board of selectmen? The board of selectmen voted.
Okay, we'll make sure the letter gets out this
Yes.
month.
And you guys need to say, Karen, send that, or just simply copy.
Let us,
Letter of conservation, that he's done, and you guys sign it.
yeah,
Majority of the board, I just.
yeah.
So,
Stamp on it.
I think you need a.
We're only advisory, we're not, we don't
Okay,
have
so-
authority.
I'm telling you what she told me.
Well, yeah, but she works for you.
all right,
You want me to
okay.
write the letter, Bruce?
No,
We already have a letter.
Letter's been written.
All we need you to do is sign the letter, please send it registered mail, I'll pay you the $3, whatever it costs.
So,
I'll make a motion, we can expense
So,
that, don't
um,
worry.
so my thought
I'll
is if the
recommend a
group,
motion, I can't actually.
if the group is in agreement, is that since Bruce has volunteered to help out a lot with the
Yeah.
fence removal, we'll
Yeah.
set a date
Yep,
And then,
Inform Deb Briscoe,
Can
she should be
we-
party to this as well, because she's raised this a couple of times. It's,
gets harder the more people
Yep,
you involve.
I
So I
know,
think
I
we're
know.
all set on the field.
Okay.
Without,
okay,
once the field, just improving the field has nothing to do with the
Yeah.
trails. And in terms of the grant, we need to, so I guess it's giving, you're suggesting that I take the lead. We need to talk to the county
Yep.
wildlife biologist that works
Yep.
for Fish and Game.
yep. You've already made
Fill it
contact
out.
with Bree, yes.
And then at the next meeting, we could review the grant unless,
Yep, I
Okay.
agree. I
Okay.
agree. Thank you, Rob, for taking
Okay.
that. Put your name next to it.
I'm tired of looking at it.
Official.
I am too. I am as well. Anything else from a member of the board, member of the commission? Reports on anything? Rob, you had something, yes.
I actually just wanted to ask if you alternate headshots.
Take them right now.
Yes.
In front of the flag.
Yeah.
And anything about the granite project?
Oh, yeah, so Patrick, Reese, and I had raised our hands to get involved with the grant project, which we have not actually dove into, but we are talking about doing that, starting
Okay.
that soon.
Okay,
Have an
Very good.
understanding of what is needed.
thank you. It's,
It's basically updating the database to have all of the land all of the protected land in town, and identifying where it is, what it's protected for.
So like this map is like an old map, and now we have to go back through and make sure all of the town records are recorded on this map.
it's a database.
Yes,
And
the database that makes this map.
in capital letters, granite.
No way.
No E,
Yeah,
no
correct,
E. And it's,
Oh, named after somebody named Granite or what?
probably, I don't know. And
It's the GIS data.
Got it.
Peter Steckler, who lives here in Brentwood, is in charge of this project, and he will help and work with any community in this region that is updating the granite database. So,
Cool.
anything else from anyone?
Motion to adjourn.
Next meeting is September 11. That's the day after elections, so get your rest. I promise, knock on wood, it will not be as long, but thank you very much. And welcome again to new members. Thank you for hanging with us, and get your pictures taken.
Is
Thank
that
you.
you, Bob, that made the motion to adjourn?
Oh, is there a second?
I second. Everybody second. Paul
All in
seconds.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What were you asking me earlier?
If there were any changes to the minutes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there were. Just a couple minor things.
Well, just send it out when.
Yeah, I mean, I'll correct it
Yeah.
and send
You
it.
can do that, thank you.
So.